We like to think we live in a world of endless choice. Every day, you engage with a system you believe is modern and fair. You fill your car with gas from Exxon or Chevron. You order packages from Amazon, scroll through platforms owned by Meta, and search on Google. You trust that these are separate, competing companies, each fighting for your business in a free market. But what if that was a carefully constructed illusion? What if I told you the entire corporate structure, the very DNA of the companies that dominate our lives, wasn't designed in a Silicon Valley garage, but in the smoky backrooms of Cleveland, Ohio, over 150 years ago? What if I told you that one man, a ruthless and visionary tycoon, didn't just build an oil empire, but architected the invisible corporate playbook that controls our world today? His name was John D. Rockefeller, and the system he perfected is one you can never truly escape. We're taught his company, Standard Oil, was a monopoly so powerful the U.S. government had to destroy it. We're taught the system was fixed. But that's the biggest misconception of all. The 1911 breakup of Standard Oil didn't kill Rockefeller's system. It made it stronger, more insidious, and it made Rockefeller himself exponentially richer. In this video, we are going to expose the secret playbook that Rockefeller created. This isn't just a history lesson. This is a revelation about the world you're living in right now. From the gas you put in your car, to the websites you visit, to the medicine you might one day depend on, you are interacting with a system perfected a century and a half ago. We are told we live in an age of unprecedented innovation, but in many ways, we still live in Rockefeller's world. A world where one man's ambition gave birth to a corporate organism that has outlived him, his company, and even his own family, embedding itself into the very fabric of our economy. We'll show you how the breakup of Standard Oil wasn't the victory for the people it was made out to be. It was more like a corporate magic trick, convincing the world the monster was slain, when in reality, it had just birthed 34 smaller, more agile versions of itself, many of which would grow to become even more powerful. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's a documented historical reality that helps explain why you might feel powerless against the corporate giants of today. They aren't new. They're just the latest evolution of a system designed for one purpose: total control. And understanding this system is the first step to seeing the matrix that surrounds us all. To understand the system, you first have to understand the man. John Davison Rockefeller wasn't born into wealth. He was born in 1839 in rural New York, son of a devout, disciplined mother and a father who was, well, the exact opposite. His father, William Big Bill Rockefeller, was a traveling con artist and snake oil salesman who peddled fake cancer cures and secretly lived a double life with multiple families. While his mother taught him piety and frugality, his father taught him the cold calculus of a transaction. This strange duality, the pious Baptist and the ruthless predator, forged the mind of John D. Rockefeller. From his first job as a bookkeeper, he was obsessed with numbers, order, and above all, with efficiency. He called it his method. Every cent was accounted for, every transaction scrutinized. He saw the world not as a place of people, but as a ledger book to be balanced, where waste was the ultimate sin. He came to believe that competition itself was a form of waste, a view that led to the famous, though likely apocryphal, quote attributed to him: "Competition is a sin." He arrived in Cleveland just as the post-Civil War oil boom was turning the region into a chaotic, cutthroat free-for-all. After the first oil well was drilled in Pennsylvania in 1859, thousands of wildcatters and refiners flooded the market. Prices were volatile. Fortunes were made and lost overnight. It was a messy, disorganized, and brutally competitive business. But where everyone else saw chaos, Rockefeller saw opportunity. He saw a system waiting to be tamed, organized, and controlled. In 1870, at just 31 years old, he incorporated the Standard Oil Company. At the time, he controlled around 10% of America's oil refining, a notable player, but still one of many. But Rockefeller had no intention of just competing. He was there to dominate. And to do it, he would write the first chapter of a playbook that would change the world forever. By the early 1880s, his market share would explode to over 90%. This wasn't just business growth. This was a conquest, achieved through a series of brilliant, brutal strategies that formed the foundation of the system we live in today. The first, and perhaps most foundational, of these strategies was his obsession with controlling every single step of the process. He wasn't just going to refine oil. He was going to own the game itself. The first rule of the Rockefeller playbook is simple. Never be at the mercy of another person's business. If you need something to make your product, build it yourself. If you need to transport your product, own the means of transport. Today, it's called vertical integration, but Rockefeller's application of it was a work of predatory genius. In the 1870s, oil refiners depended on a whole network of other businesses. They had to buy crude oil from drillers, barrels from coopers, and most critically, pay whatever the powerful railroads demanded to ship their product. Each of these was a vulnerability, a place where someone else could squeeze their profits. Rockefeller decided to eliminate every single one. He didn't just refine oil. He set out to control the entire supply chain. He bought his own timberland to make his own barrels, slashing costs with relentless efficiency. Some accounts suggest he drove the cost of a single barrel from over $2.50 down to less than $1. His competitors, still buying barrels on the open market, couldn't keep up. He then bought his own chemical plants, built his own warehouses, and acquired his own tanker cars. But his war with the railroads was his true masterstroke. He knew transportation was the jugular vein of the industry. In 1872, he joined a secret, ambitious plan called the South Improvement Company. The scheme would have given him not just deep discounts or rebates for his own shipments, but also drawbacks, a kickback on every barrel his competitors shipped. The public backlash was so fierce that the plan was dismantled before it ever shipped a single drop of oil. But it showed Rockefeller's hand. He then used his massive shipping volume to negotiate other secret, controversial rebates directly with the railroads, which, while common, gave him a parasitic advantage. The more business his rivals did, the richer he became. This control of the supply chain gave him an unassailable edge. He could withstand price wars that bankrupted others. He could lower the price of kerosene to a point that was ruinous for his rivals, forcing them to the negotiating table. He made kerosene, once a luxury, affordable for the average household, dropping the price by over 80%. To the public, he was a hero. To his competitors, he was a boa constrictor, methodically squeezing the life out of them. Think of Amazon. Jeff Bezos didn't just want to sell things. He wanted to own the entire ecosystem of commerce. Amazon started as a retailer, but quickly moved to control its supply chain. It built its own massive fulfillment centers, a modern-day version of Rockefeller's warehouses. It then created its own logistics and delivery network, planes, trucks, and vans to bypass traditional carriers, just as Rockefeller built pipelines to bypass the railroads. But the real modern-day drawback is Amazon Web Services, or AWS. It's the cloud computing backbone of the internet, hosting the websites and data of millions of companies, including many of Amazon's own direct competitors. Netflix, for example, runs its massive streaming service on Amazon Web Services. Amazon gets paid by its own rivals simply for them to exist. They get invaluable data on market trends, which they can then use to launch their own Amazon Basics products, often undercutting the very businesses that paid them for hosting. It's the Rockefeller playbook, digitized for the 21st century. Own the infrastructure. Control the whole process. Make your competitors dependent on you. Vertical integration was step one, but to achieve true dominance, Rockefeller needed to eliminate anyone else on the ladder. If vertical integration is about controlling the ladder, horizontal consolidation is about kicking everyone else off it. Rockefeller's goal wasn't just to be the most efficient refiner. It was to be the only refiner. His strategy was brutal and direct. Buy your competitors, and if they refuse to sell, bury them. The most famous example of this was the Cleveland Massacre of 1872. At the time, Cleveland had 26 independent refineries. Armed with his secret railroad rebates, Rockefeller approached his rivals one by one with a grim proposition. The offer was simple: sell to me. You would lay out the cold, hard math of the situation, showing them his lower shipping costs and explaining that he could sell kerosene for less than it cost them to make it. They had a choice except the payout, usually in Standard Oil stock, or face certain bankruptcy. The implied promise, as legend has it, was take Standard Oil stock and your family will never know want. In just 6 weeks, Rockefeller acquired 22 of his 26 Cleveland competitors. The city's refining industry was his. This campaign of acquisition wasn't a one-time event. It was a template he replicated in city after city. If a refinery was inefficient, he'd buy it for pennies on the dollar and dismantle it. If it was well run, he'd absorb it into his growing empire. By the early 1880s, Standard Oil controlled roughly 90% of America's oil refining. He had achieved a near-total monopoly. Now, let's fast forward. The buy or bury spirit is alive and well, especially in big tech. Consider Meta. In 2012, a small, fast-growing photo-sharing app called Instagram was emerging as a potential threat. So, what did Mark Zuckerberg do? He followed the playbook. He bought it for what seemed like a shocking sum at the time: $1 billion. 2 years later, he did it again with the global messaging app WhatsApp, this time for $19 billion. Meta didn't invent the best photo-sharing app or the best messaging app. It bought them, neutralizing the competition and consolidating the social media landscape. Or look at Google, which has acquired over 240 companies. It bought YouTube when it was a rising video competitor. It bought Android to ensure its services would have a permanent home on smartphones. It bought Waze to corner the navigation market. This isn't just about growth. It's about eliminating threats before they mature. It's horizontal consolidation for the digital age. Just as Rockefeller bought competing refineries to control the flow of oil, modern tech giants buy competing startups to control the flow of data and attention. But simply owning all the assets wasn't enough. Rockefeller needed a way to control his sprawling empire without attracting the wrong kind of attention. For that, he had to invent a whole new kind of company. Step 3. The Trust and Holding Company, the Invisibility Cloak. By the early 1880s, Rockefeller had a problem. He controlled dozens of companies across multiple states, but corporate law at the time was restrictive. A company chartered in Ohio couldn't legally own stock in companies in other states. His empire was a patchwork of secret, legally dubious arrangements. To solidify his control, he needed a new corporate structure, a kind of invisibility cloak to command his entire empire from a single point. The solution, devised by his lawyer Samuel Dodd in 1882, was the corporate trust. It was a revolutionary idea. Stockholders from 37 of the companies in the Standard Oil Alliance turned over their shares to a central group of 9 trustees, led by Rockefeller. In return, they got trust certificates that paid them a share of the profits from the entire combined operation. On paper, the companies remained separate. In reality, their voting power and strategy were now concentrated in the hands of 9 men. The trust allowed Rockefeller to operate as a single, monolithic company across the nation, centralizing management and crushing any remaining competition. It was a corporation of corporations, the first great industrial trust of its kind, and a legal labyrinth for anyone on the outside. The Standard Oil Trust became the blueprint for a generation of monopolists in sugar, tobacco, and steel. When courts eventually declared these trusts illegal, the playbook just evolved. After New Jersey changed its laws in 1889 to allow corporations to own stock in other corporations, the trust was eventually replaced by the holding company, a parent company that doesn't produce anything itself but exists solely to own and control its subsidiaries. This brings us directly to the structure of today's most powerful companies. Look at Google. In 2015, it restructured, creating a new parent entity called Alphabet Inc. Google, the search engine, became just one subsidiary alongside ventures like Waymo and Verily. The move echoed the same logic Rockefeller used. It allows the profitable core business to be insulated from riskier projects and helps manage a mind-bogglingly complex global operation. Alphabet doesn't make a single product. It owns the companies that do. While it files public reports, this structure gives it a way to organize its empire, optimize its finances, and manage its many arms from a central brain, a modern evolution of the Standard Oil model. You see the same pattern everywhere. Meta is the holding company for Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. JP Morgan Chase is a holding company for a vast network of financial subsidiaries. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway is a holding company that owns everything from Geico to Dairy Queen. This structure is the ultimate corporate shield. It provides centralized control while creating an illusion of separation, making the true scale of the enterprise hard to comprehend. It's Rockefeller's blueprint, woven into the fabric of modern capitalism. But owning the board wasn't enough. To ensure the system's survival, Rockefeller had to own the rules of the game itself. By the turn of the 20th century, John D. Rockefeller was one of the most hated men in America, depicted in cartoons as a monstrous octopus with its tentacles wrapped around the Capitol. The public outcry was deafening. Rockefeller knew brute force wasn't enough anymore. To protect his empire, he needed to master the final, most sophisticated part of his playbook, capturing the systems meant to regulate him, and more importantly, capturing the public narrative. The first prong was influencing the political and regulatory landscape. Standard Oil became a master of lobbying and legal challenges, using its immense power to shape legislation in its favor. The goal was to ensure that the rules of the game were always written by the players. Today, this practice is an institution. Big Pharma, for example, spends hundreds of millions of dollars a year lobbying in Washington, D.C. on laws about patents and drug pricing. The FDA, which regulates the industry, is even partially funded by user fees from the same companies it oversees, a situation many critics call a clear conflict of interest. The second, more brilliant prong was philanthropic capture. Advised by public relations pioneer Ivy Lee, Rockefeller began to give his money away on an unprecedented scale. He didn't just buy art. He founded the University of Chicago and the Rockefeller Foundation, which he endowed with the equivalent of billions of dollars today. This was strategic philanthropy. The foundation poured money into medicine, science, and education. It funded major institutions and was instrumental in public health campaigns. These were undeniably good things, but they also served another purpose. They transformed Rockefeller's image from reviled monopolist to beloved public benefactor, and they gave him immense power to shape society. By funding medical schools, for instance, his foundations helped promote a specific laboratory-based scientific model of medicine. Critics argue this favored certain approaches to health over others, all under the halo of altruism. This model of philanthrocapitalism is the blueprint for the great foundations of our time. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, for example, operates on a scale that rivals many governments. Its work has done immense good in the fight against diseases like polio and malaria, but it also faces similar criticisms. As one of the largest voluntary contributors to the World Health Organization, it gains unparalleled influence over the global health agenda. It's the ultimate expression of Rockefeller's playbook. When you are rich enough, you don't just follow the rules. You can start to rewrite them. You can fund the universities that produce the experts, the foundations that set the policy agenda, and the media that shapes the narrative. With this final step, the system becomes truly self-perpetuating, ready for its greatest test and its greatest deception. By 1911, the pressure against Standard Oil was unstoppable. In the landmark case Standard Oil Co. of New Jersey, United States, the Supreme Court delivered its verdict. The company was an unreasonable monopoly and must be dismantled. The government had slain the beast. The headlines declared a victory for the people. The great monopoly was dead. This is the story we're all taught. But it isn't the whole story, not by a long shot. The court ordered Standard Oil to be broken up into 34 separate companies. But here's the twist. John D. Rockefeller, who owned about 25% of Standard Oil's stock, didn't lose a dime. Instead, he received a proportionate share of stock in each of the 34 new companies. Before, he owned a huge piece of one giant company. After, he owned a big piece of 34 smaller, nimbler, and now supposedly competing companies. What happened next was the ultimate validation of his system. Investors, realizing these individual companies were now free to expand without the legal baggage of the monopoly, rushed to buy their stock. The individual parts, it turned out, were worth far more than the whole. The combined value of the successor companies skyrocketed. Rockefeller's personal fortune, estimated at around $300 million before the breakup, exploded. It reportedly tripled to an estimated $900 million, making him the world's first billionaire and, adjusted for inflation, the richest person in modern history. The very act designed to punish him had made him unimaginably wealthy. The system hadn't been defeated. It had metastasized. And what became of those baby standards? Did they usher in a new era of competition? For a while. But the Rockefeller DNA was in them. Over the decades, they began to do what the playbook dictated. They consolidated. Standard Oil of New Jersey became Esso, which later became Exxon. Standard Oil of New York became Mobil. In 1999, these two giants merged to form ExxonMobil, creating an energy titan that echoed the power of the original. Standard Oil of California became Chevron. Standard Oil of Indiana became Amoco, which was later bought by British Petroleum BP, a company that also acquired Standard Oil of Ohio. The breakup was an illusion of change. It scattered the pieces of the empire, only for them to slowly, inevitably, recombine. Today, when you see a gas station for Exxon, Mobil, or Chevron, you are looking at the direct descendants of the company the government claimed to have destroyed over a century ago. The names change, but the lineage is unbroken. The playbook survived. So here we are, living in a world governed by rules written 150 years ago by a man obsessed with control. Vertical integration, horizontal consolidation. The holding company, strategic philanthropy, the echoes of this playbook are the operating system of modern power. You see it in Amazon, which owns the marketplace, the delivery network, and the web servers its competitors depend on. You see it in Meta, which bought its biggest rivals to ensure its dominion. You see it in Alphabet, a holding company that brilliantly organizes a vast ecosystem of technology and data. And you see it in the reconsolidated oil giants like ExxonMobil and Chevron, the children of Standard Oil who grew up and merged back together. The great misconception was that the system could be broken by taking down one company. But Rockefeller's true creation wasn't a company. It was an idea, a ruthless, efficient, and endlessly adaptable model for accumulating and protecting power. The 1911 breakup didn't destroy this model. It stress-tested it and proved its resilience. Can you escape it? No, not really. To disengage from this system would mean disengaging from modern life. You can't just stop using the internet, or the banking system, or transportation. But that doesn't mean you're powerless. The system's greatest strength is its invisibility. The solution, then, is not escape, but understanding. By seeing the playbook in action, you change your relationship with it. You're no longer just a passive consumer. You're an informed observer. You can see the mergers, the acquisitions, and the multi-billion-dollar charitable donations not as isolated events, but as strategic moves in a very old game. You understand why your local bookstore can't compete with Amazon, why there are so few social media alternatives, and why some industries seem untouchable. Knowledge is the only real power we have. If this video showed you a system you didn't know existed, if it connected the dots between a 19th century tycoon and your 21st century life, then our goal is accomplished. The first step to changing the game is to understand the rules. And now you do. You may never escape Rockefeller's world, but you no longer have to live in it blind.